Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris back again, and it is that time. A new Helloween album is on the horizon, and there is no better time to talk about it in advance of the new release. Giants and Monsters coming out August 29th, and here we are talking about it just a few days ahead of its release. I am so excited to talk about this album with you. This has been quite the journey over the last few weeks, but before we talk all things Helloween, how are you, my friend?
Really good. I have listened to this album a lot. So I've also kind of been on somewhat of a journey with it where my opinion has changed quite a bit since I first listened to it. This was a grower in a way that the previous album was not so much for me. That was kind of like an instant classic for me. This one really took a lot of listens, and I'm glad. I want to just shout out to Reigning Phoenix Records for sending this to us as early as they did, because it really gave us enough time to really ingest it and get to know the album before it comes out. And by the time you're hearing this, the album will be released in a couple of days on August 29th. So, but yeah, we've had this since was it like late June or something? Like, we've had this for a while.
Yes, and I definitely needed the time with it because my perspective has changed quite a bit too on a number of fronts. But we'll talk about all things related to Giants and Monsters momentarily. But as we always do, I wanted to just talk about some stuff that we've been listening to over the last few weeks that is not Helloween. I've got a few things in particular which kind of caught my ear. The first of which was a band that I actually want to send you some of their stuff. The band is called Arcane Sanctuary, and they came out with an album that and by the way, I had never heard of this band, so I want to be clear. The album is called The Traveler's Diary. They are a Argentinian progressive symphonic metal band. I think they got back together in 2023 or something like that. And I just on a whim picked this album up, and I was pleasantly surprised. When I listened to this thing, it was one of those albums, and it happens from time to time where I listen to something, I'm like, oh yeah, Chris is going to really enjoy this. Just something about it, that blend of symphonic, lush keyboards, and a female vocalist who is rather enjoyable. It took a little getting used to her vocals, but when you do, you realize this is a really good album, and I think you're going to enjoy it a lot. So I'm going to post one of their tracks this week so that you can hear it. I'm assuming you've never even heard of this band, because I sure as hell hadn't.
No, definitely not. You have my interest piqued, so I will check it out for sure. Yeah, very good.
Another album that I have not yet heard, and I should be clear about this, but I'm gonna actually do a deep dive into it once we're done recording today. But I have heard from multiple sources that the new Black Braid album called Black Braid 3 is like album of the year potential. It's atmospheric black metal from one of the hubs of atmospheric black metal, namely the Adirondacks, New York. I am not kidding when I say this, but this particular album has gotten rave reviews from multiple circles that I am either in or adjacent to. And so I've heard that this might be the black metal album of the year, in certain cases the album of the year. So I am going to give this one a listen as well. I'll post one of the tracks from this album as well. This band has only been around for a few years, I think going back to February of 22 or something like that. So this is going to be a very an interesting black metal release that I'm looking forward to. And in a completely different vein, the new ACT album, Eternal Winter, has come out. And for those that don't know, ACT is a progressive rock band that is from Sweden. So they've been around since like 1995. So we're going on 30 years.
Is it ACT or ACT?
It's ACT, but I'm going to say it's ACT, like the college entrance exam. Well, call them whatever you want. The fact is, whenever these guys release an album, I always forget how good they are. And it's like a blend of prog rock and some pop that is just like radio-friendly rock music. Really catchy, really introspective lyrics. Thoroughly enjoyed this album, so I want to give this one a shout out as well. just so much stuff that's coming out and crossing genres too, right? Black metal, prog rock, symphonic metal. I talked about a lot of melodic death metal albums of late. Just a lot of stuff on the horizon and stuff that people should be checking out. But if you're looking for something new, I think you could do worse than these 3 releases.
Nice. Good stuff to check out. You do a great job at sharing a lot of this stuff throughout the week, and it's always an education for me, and hopefully for others as well. So yeah, good stuff. We're going to be limited as to how much of this album we're talking about today we can actually play, both in the episode itself and on social media as of this week, because the album's not released yet. So we'll have to, be a little more creative, I suppose. And
yeah, I think we'll be identifying our songs of the week, but not actually playing them, just because we don't have, the album's not out yet. So we want to do right by them. And what we'll do is we'll just identify it. We'll certainly come back to it at some point. And I think by the time that people have had a chance to listen to the podcast, hopefully the album is on the very near horizon at that point, if not, in the rearview mirror. So I'm sure people can check out our songs after the fact, but I think that people would be remiss not to listen to the entire album. But with that, I think I also give the caveat, it's going to take more than one listen. And what's interesting, and I'll just kind of kick it off here, as far as the Giants and Monsters discussion goes, I usually like Helloween albums the second that I hear them. I think that for some reason, I know what the band sounds like. It's usually very, very catchy, and it's just a matter of how much I'm going to like it. This one, the first time I heard it, I actually paused and didn't go back to it for like a solid 2 weeks because I was just not expecting what I heard. And then I went back to it, and I'm very glad that I did, because I think my opinion has changed quite a bit on where I was when I first heard it. But it's just amazing, because when I think of bands that take time to kind of marinate, I think of bands like Pain of Salvation, and I think of bands like Dream Theater, and a lot of the proggy stuff that can take a little bit of time. I don't usually associate that with power metal. Power metal usually just hits me right away, and Helloween is typically no exception. This album, however, was an exception, and I think that every song sounds so different from the rest, but I just wasn't ready for what I heard when we first got this album, a couple of months ago.
I pretty much share your sentiment there. I mean, first of all, the first couple of listens that I heard was from a stream that RPM provided for us, and I'll be honest with you, the quality was not to me like final product quality. It felt like, for those who remember the MP3 generation, it reminded me of like a 96 megabytes per second MP3, where if 128 is like the bare minimum of decent quality, 96 is like where it starts to sound like it was recorded on a child's, Fisher Price tape deck. And so that,
like most of 90s black metal, for example.
Yes, exactly. And so I think that may have affected both of our opinions at the get-go, but once we were able to get an actual, MP3 copy of the album, and the quality was improved, although it's not my favorite production, and I'm sure we'll talk about that, but the more and more I listened to it, and it was funny because it would just come on after I was done listening to the Ozzy Blizzard of Oz album that we covered a couple of weeks ago, and I would just leave it on. Like, as soon as that first track hit, I would just end up leaving the whole album on, and just I would enjoy it a little bit more each time, until I think I finally hit like a plateau where I'm like, okay, I think I'm where I'm gonna feel about this album going forward. Plus whatever nostalgia ends up growing for it over time. But whereas like the previous self-titled album, I think was like just hit us instantly. And maybe it was just because the first time like that, having an album with Kai and Michael Kiske back in the band, like that opening track is still one of my favorite Helloween songs of all time. It was just, the timing of it and everything, but I just think it was a really high quality album, and going back into our statistics, I gave the album at the time a 9.5, which I stand by that. I think it's still a very strong album. I haven't gone back and listened to the whole thing, start to finish, in a while, but I think that some of my favorite Helloween songs ever are on that album, and for that reason, I think that ranking stands for me. You gave it an 8.75, and I remember you saying at the time it's too new to like give it a higher rating than that. So, very fair. But I'm going to be curious to see where this falls in comparison to that. But yeah, this was definitely a grower, like I said. But once once it grew, I really enjoyed it. Even the first single, "This Is Tokyo," which I didn't really love initially, it really grew on me as I listened to it as part of the album whole. So yeah, I think that kind of makes for a pretty good intro from both of us. So I guess if there's anybody out there that gets the album and is a little bit like, scratching their head and like, this isn't as good as the last one, keep listening, because for whatever reason, it just took a little while. I wonder if there were other people that felt the same way about it. But yeah, definitely, like, I think that last album was kind of like, it started at a 9, I think, from the first listen and made its way to a 9.5 for me. And this one, like, I'm not going to lie. Like, I think upon first listen, I would have given it like maybe a 7 or a 7.5. And it's grown certainly more than half a point since then. I'll just say that.
I was going to ask you what that initial score would have been, but it's almost unfair because it just didn't sound great with the stream. It certainly sounds better now. I look forward to hearing like a lossless audio quality, like a high-end audio quality upon its release. So again, what I say is with the caveat that it could change when I hear the final high-quality version. I do think that the production does leave some room for improvement, but again, I don't know if that's just the copy we got or if it's just the way that the final mastering was. But I am going to factor that into my score because I am basing it off the promo copy, and I do have to ding it a little bit only because I've heard Helloween albums sound fuller, sound richer, sound less tinny when it comes to the drum cymbals and things like that. Again, a very listenable album. I must have listened to this thing a dozen times over the last 2 months, but at the same time, I don't want to say that it was like the most sonically brilliant recording that I've ever heard, just because, to be fair, there's a lot going on here. You've got 3 guitars, you've got multiple layers of vocals on a lot of these tracks, and much like every other Helloween release, Marcus Grosskopf is a player on this thing. It's not just this bass that just kind of permeates the album, but his bass lines are every bit as much as part of the band as the guitar work is. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there before we get into it. And of course, the lineup is, the current touring lineup for the band. The band is, with the exception of a handful of members, this is basically everyone that's touched this band over the last 35 years or so. That being said, Michael Kiske on vocals, Andy Derris on vocals, Kai Hansen on vocals and guitars, Michael Weikath, Sasha Gerstner on guitars, Marcus Grosskopf on bass, and Daniel Lobel on drums. Having had the pleasure of seeing this touring outfit live, I will say that I'm very excited to see some of these songs in a live setting because I think they're going to lend itself very well to that kind of an environment.
It's interesting. It got me thinking when you mentioned Danny Lobel, who's the band's drummer. This core of Helloween, even not counting Kai and Kiske, but the band prior to them rejoining, has been intact since 2005. It's been 20 years. Easily the band's most consistent lineup in the history of the band. It's hard to believe that it was that long ago that he joined the band. There was a bunch of personnel changes after Uli Kusch left the band. Mark Cross was briefly brought in. He, I think, ended up getting like mono or something, and so he only plays like a little bit. He only shows up a little bit on the Rabbit Don't Come Easy album. I think Mickey D from Motorhead came in and did some studio work on that album, and then they eventually ended up with Stefan Schwartzman, who I believe was the drummer from Accept at one point. And then finally, he stayed in the band for a few years, and then Danny Lobel joined the group and has been there ever since. So the band has really stayed consistently, lineup wise since then, so the last 20 years. And so it's really cool what this band has done with it. It's already established members, and then bringing back the two classic Keeper era guys. Just a really interesting like group of guys. It all came together really well, and we received a really lengthy press release from RPM, and I'm going to pull some quotes from that as we go through. But I have to say, like, there was one thing. Did I already lose it? Unbelievable. There was, yes. It says that this is the most versatile album of the band's career. And I have to say, that's a really good word, I think, to describe this album, and maybe part of the reason it took a little while to click for both of us, because it is versatile. There's a lot of different types of songs on here, and I actually was able to pull up a list of who wrote all the songs, and so I think that is actually going to lend some insight into the sound of the songs without actually without the listener being able to actually hear it. We'll kind of describe it as best we can, but I think if you know the members' songwriting process or tropes, you might actually be able to like envision what it might sound like without actually hearing any of it. So yeah, I'm probably going to get rambly because it's Helloween, so brace yourself for that.
Well, let's ramble on, shall we? Giants on the Run, a song that kicks this thing off. A really solid riff and these intermittent keys, which has now become kind of a staple for a lot of these Helloween songs, that they've incorporated that keyboard element, which, again, they dabbled in the past, but it's really kind of such a prominent part of these albums now. I think the Derris verses are somewhat understated, but they got this really big chorus on this song, very double bass drum heavy. It actually reminds me a lot of some of their earlier work. The chorus specifically, I just can't pinpoint what song it is, but I hear it's almost like a callback to an earlier era of this band. And then you get to this instrumental section, which is kind of proggy, and it leads into this Kai Hansen-led bridge, which is really heavy, really emotional. And to me, it's almost the highlight of the entire song. I love the bridge on this thing. A good opening track to kind of set the table for the other 9 tracks.
Yeah, this one really grew on me. I didn't love it at first, and it grew on me the more and more I listened to it. And it makes a lot of sense when you see that the songwriters for this song are Andy Darris and Kai Hansen together. And to me, it sounds like Andy wrote the verses and the chorus, and Kai wrote that slow section that he sings on, because all of a sudden, it kind of feels like you're listening to a Gamma Ray song. And then when it comes in with those layered Kai vocals, it's very Gamma Ray, like the high-pitched Kai layered vocals, like trademark Gamma Ray. It's not the last time I'm going to be reminded of Gamma Ray on this album. It's just you can't escape it when Kai has as much creative input on this album. But I absolutely agree with you that the rest of the song is very akin to like a Time of the Oath, Better Than Raw era Helloween, just a very like Andy Darris driven song, on the higher end of Andy's songwriting, in my opinion. And I think that like Kai, like with Kai jumping in and adding like his flourishes to it, I think it makes for a really good opening track. Strong solos as always, like these are like all pros here. I'll read from the press release. It says, already the opener, Giants on the Run, flips the switch from the very first riff and impressively marks the terrain with the power voices of Andy and Kai. No trace of restraint. The track takes a break, takes off, and unleashes a roar that leaves no doubt about the blazing pulse of the 10 new songs. So a really nice start, I think.
Yeah, I this one was one of the real growers for me. I I will say that the album in certain respects felt like an Oreo cookie, except I thought that the cookie was better than the filling in the middle, at least in part. And in no small part to this track, which I enjoyed. And then Savior of the World, the second track, was even more just like I loved it, right? This was a straightforward banger. I think Kisk sounds really good, especially during those verses. Very upbeat, very nice drum fills, and the chorus is just classic Helloween. It's a real earworm. I think it might be the best song of the first half of the disc. I think that I think it's hard to not say that it's my favorite of the five first songs. Obviously, the solos are good, but I just absolutely adore the bridge here again, where Kiss just pushes everything into this higher register. And it's amazing that this man at like 57 years old can still do this. I really hope they play this one live. It is one of my favorite tracks on the album, and it's up there for Song of the Week.
I am going to make this song my song of the week. I for sure thought it was going to be Under the Moonlight, and we'll get to that. That was my favorite track pretty much for the duration of the time I've had this album in my possession. But I got to be honest with you, I think as far as just a epic Wyke penned song is, and he has at least one on every album, this is it right here. Very like Eagle Fly Free, not like a clone, but just that the way that it's constructed is just this super epic power metal song. It's just only Wyke can write. It's just, I knew it was him before I even knew it was him, and it's really interesting that of the two songs that he wrote for this album, Kisk is the vocalist on both. Which is really cool because that pairing to me, the Wyke songwriting with the Kiss vocal styles, is just reminds me of the glory days of Eagle Fly Free and Dr. Steen and Keeper of the Seven Keys and all those great songs that Wyke wrote. This is just a real excellent song. And I this is the one that I think after a half dozen listens, it would just end up in my head. Like it just would get stuck in my head. It's such a good song. It's one of a handful of songs that I think I could have chosen for Song of the Week, but this I think is going to be the best example of like my favorite kind of power metal songwriting from one of my all-time favorite power metal songwriters. And normally I'd cue to the 1 minute clip, but we can't play it yet. So we will post it. I don't know. I guess maybe the following week we could post our Helloween songs of the week, provided yours isn't one of the singles, in which case we can play it. But if not, I'll post it personally, just because I think this is such a great song and has that like really just amazing like epic ending that just it's very. I didn't notice it as much initially, but there are, going back and listening to it, there are so many eras of Helloween that I'm like taken back to throughout the listening experience. And you had mentioned, the early Darius era. I think that's what you meant on the first track. And like this one feels like it could have been on like one of the Keeper albums, or probably a song people hoped was going to end up on Chameleon and never happened. But yeah, really great tune.
I also just knew it was Wyckoff as soon as I heard the song, just because he's got such a distinct way that he writes much of his songs, but yet they all sound fresh and they don't sound repetitive, and it's not like, oh, it's same old Wyke. It doesn't feel like that. So I agree with you. Like I said, not my song of the week. It was. I'm glad you chose it though. It was certainly up there for me. But the album takes a little bit of this twist at this point, and it's kind of interesting because a little is a little too much. The third track sounds nothing like the first two, so I'll let you do the honors, and then I'll talk about my thoughts on this one.
Yeah, sure. We're talking about We Can Be Gods, correct?
No. A little is a little too
Oh
much.
God, I'm sorry. I just had like a major brain fart. Excuse me.
No worries, no worries.
Um, this was a song that I did not care for initially, but it has grown on me quite a bit. It's very much a very much an Andy Darris kind of pop metal tune, like a pop power metal tune. But I think that having Andy and Kiss kind of do like a duet together, like brings it up higher for me. I ended up liking it a little bit more than I did initially. It's probably my least favorite song on the album, I would argue. But it's not bad. It really did kind of grow on me after a while. Pulling from the press release, it said, musically rather straightforward and a veritable hit. A little is a little too much gives Andy and Kisk the space their monumental voices need for an intimate story. And this was a quote from Andy himself. He said, basically, it's about the famous straw that breaks the camel's back. During the writing process, however, I remembered an experience I had at the age of 15, and the lyrics ended up being pretty erotic about little things that can quickly put an end to a big thing, grins Darris. So, you know, you can use your imagination, I suppose, on that one. Yeah, I'm curious how you feel about this one, because it is kind of a quirky tune.
The way this song starts, it reminds me of like an 80s movie. Just that whole vibe at the beginning, the keys and everything. And I think for the first time, the bass lines really pop on this song. So Marcus Grosboff is kind of front and center. And I really do enjoy these Darris verses. They're a little bit benign, but I actually do prefer the verses to the chorus on this song. My issue with it is that the song itself, especially the drums, just sounded so like cymbal heavy that it caused this tinny reaction that I thought was just, dare I say, a little too much. No pun intended. But it was a result of that drum sound that I didn't love the track. I think it's a good tune. It's just not outstanding, and there's better stuff to come. But at the same time, I certainly like it now more than I did when I first heard it. When I first heard it, I did not care for it, and now I think it's a good tune.
Yeah, I feel like they maybe could have thought about making this like the first single. The piano is very akin. It reminds me of "If I Could Fly." That same piano tone. It's like almost like an Andy Darris trope at this point. Solid little tune. But probably is it your least favorite song on the album, or?
I think it's. If it's not my least favorite, it's one of my two least favorites. I have another one that I would kind of put in that category, but that's not to say I didn't like it. I liked it. I just don't know that I loved it.
Okay, that's fair.
But I'm curious to actually talk about the song you referenced earlier, "We Can Be Gods," because this song is darker, it's heavier, and I think it provides a stark contrast to the first three. And I really want to get into this, but who's credited with the songwriting for this song, because I was curious about that.
This one goes to Kai, and an interesting tidbit about Kai's songwriting on this album. You know, we had mentioned that he co-wrote "Giants on the Run" with Andy. Kai wrote "We Can Be Gods" and "Majestic," which is the last track on the album, and they happen to be the only tracks on the album that feature all three vocalists. So it's interesting that Kai really wanted to feature all three vocalists, and I feel like Kai does more vocally than he did on the previous album. At least as far as I can remember, it feels like he's more a part of the process. But this song is another one that I didn't think too much of initially, and it really, really, really grew on me as I kept listening. Super infectious chorus that is the way that Kisk sings it just throws me back to like the Keeper era and even like the Pink Bubbles time period. I like this one a lot. Kai really, the fact that he hasn't like written any songs for Gamma Ray in so many years, it's like he, has like 2 or 3 songs that he gets every few years to Helloween, and it's like really vintage. It's almost like he feels reinvigorated as a songwriter. And I think not having to do all the singing too, I think has really been good for him, and he can focus on songwriting and playing the guitar, and then he just throws in that unmistakable Kai voice that like no one else sounds like. Really, really cool song, and I think that it's well placed after the last track, which was a little bit on the poppier side. This one's kind of back to the that double bass, fast tempo power metal that you come to expect from this band.
You hit on a lot, so I don't want to just repeat what you said, but I will just echo a couple of your sentiments. Number one, I love how all three vocalists are employed. Especially, it's almost like Darius and Kai are providing backing vocals to Kisk in a lot of these spots, but it sounds so good when you put it together. And that chorus, like you mentioned, having all three singers and just an effective use of keyboards, great chorus. And the song did grow on me too. I did not really think much of it when I first heard it, but now it's probably one of the better songs on the album, maybe in the top half of songs on the album. And I think that sonically, it's probably the best sounding song on the album. I just thought that this song sounded particularly good. That is not to say that the album sounds bad, but this one stood out as one of the best sounding songs on the entire album.
I feel like in general, the treble is a little bit heavy on this album. And I think for that reason, like a lot of the snares sound really almost like if you're listening loudly on headphones, it's almost like kind of, you almost cringe when you hear it. It's almost like a little bit jarring. I don't know if that is like, a purposeful thing. The album was produced and mixed by Charlie Bauerfeind and Dennis Ward. So I've noticed that Helloween's mixing has been kind of like inconsistent since probably The Dark Ride, maybe around that time, the early 2000s. Like, I don't know what it is. They seem to, even when they remixed some of those old songs for the Treasure Chest compilation, it felt like they were focusing more on the treble end rather than the bass end. So it might be a matter of taste. I tend to like, to me, it's more of a cleaner sound on those Time of the Oath, Better Than Raw. Better Than Raw is probably my all-time favorite, like Helloween album production wise. I think it just sounds really great. But nitpicking, I would say, it's just, it took a little while to get used to, but I kind of stopped noticing it after a while. But yeah, I like this song quite a bit. It became one of my favorite songs on the album, and another one that got stuck in my head on numerous occasions.
Yeah, and when you kind of break it down into two like sides of the album, it ends side A. Track 5 is this song called Into the Sun. Surprisingly, when I first heard it, it was not a Vanden Plas cover. But once I got over that initial shock, this is a ballad where Kisk and Darius really have a chance to shine. And what struck out to me most about this song is not only how different their vocals are, because they couldn't sound anything more different, but when you put them together, they actually complement each other exceptionally well. And it's amazing because they kind of alternate verses, but then you have this big bombastic chorus when they sing together, and it is really good. And I don't think it's their best ballad, but I think it was needed on the album, and it certainly suffices as the ballad on the album. Another one that grew on me, but really more than anything because of the vocals.
Helloween has always been a great band when it comes to power ballads, and this is no different. And I have a feeling this is definitely going to be on the live set list because it's just an opportunity for everybody to slow their rolls and for Andy and Kisk to just sit there. They did it with I want to say it was Forever and One on the last tour, which was wonderful. Especially hearing Kisk be a part of that song that that at the time was like 3 years after he had left the band. And for him to come back and sing that. And it's one of those examples of one of those older songs that hearing them do a duet kind of breathes new life into it. And I think this is just going to be one of those songs, very, very like Andy forward, like as far as songwriting goes, power ballad, but probably one of my favorite that he's written in his time in the band. Really good. Here's a couple interesting tidbits on this one. The song was originally recorded for the last album, but it was scrapped after being altered during production, and the final result wasn't to their liking. So they decided to re-record it for this album. Masterclass, and this is from the press release, Masterclass is just as evident in gigantic ballads, and Giants and Monsters serves the first one in this constellation. Into the Sun is a duet in which Darris and Kisk sweepingly pour their hearts out, carried by masterfully orchestrated string cascades and yearning guitar solos. And Darris says, originally the song had different lyrics, but now it's about reincarnation, and that suits the track much better. Mikey and I share similar beliefs in that area, and I really wanted us to record the song together. He just sounds great when he sings it. So it's such a... Listen, I know I've told this story many times, but when I was a kid in high school, I used to picture what it would be like for Kisk to be back in this band again and singing live, and I would get goosebumps and like I'd get teary-eyed or whatever. And the fact that it's happening at the like recommendation of Andy Darris, and for them to just all come together, and I feel like it's better than them reverting back to the Keeper lineup, because it combines all of the great eras of Helloween all into one. And I think this song kind of is an amalgamation of that. And another one that really grew on me as time went by.
Yeah, I think that's very, very well said. And, you had asked me earlier what my least favorite track on the album was, or, what was, it was a little too much, my least favorite. And the reason I kind of hedged and I said I don't know is because I actually think that the first single, This Is Tokyo, is my least favorite. I understand why they went with this as a single, but it left me kind of cold from the moment I heard it. And maybe that's part of the reason I didn't love the album on the first listen. I'm not sure. It's not that it's a bad song. It's just very safe. They didn't push any boundaries with this one. And it's not an insult to Darris. It's just kind of like your standard single. I think the guitars sound a little bit muddied, but it's a classic Darris tune. It's easy to recognize his songwriting. And I just don't know that there's anything that particularly stands out about this song. I trust that it will be played live as well, just because it was the first single from the album. And I'm very curious to hear how it will sound in that kind of a setting. I just don't think the song is remarkable when you compare it to other songs on this disc.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think I like it a bit more, and it really grew on me the more and more I listened to it. When I first heard it, I was like, this is an odd choice for the first single. And then I kind of started to think about in the past, there were songs that the band would release as a first single that were kind of on the poppier, safer side, if you will. But this one really grew on me as time went by. I mean, Andy does most of the vocals, but Kisk is part of it as well. And it, again, has like that If I Could Fly-esque piano tone to it. Again, like I said earlier, a Darris staple. But I thought this was a solid tune, and in retrospect, I don't know that I would have made it the first single, but it makes sense as a single. Again, going back to the press release, This Is Tokyo is another personal track. Andy says, I've always wanted to write this song. Japan plays a very special role in my life because I had my first big successes there with Pink Cream 69, and they've always treated me incredibly well. I wanted to create a tribute to Japan and finally had the right idea for the lyrics. Because Tokyo sounds better in a chorus than Japan, the city stands for a whole country that is very important to me. So it has a little bit of a special place in Andy's heart, and I do enjoy like they do a good job of having the Andy and Kisk sing together, and I think that's cool. Like you said before, they have this way of, with Andy having kind of a lower registered voice and Kisk having a higher registered voice, it makes for a really good melodic kind of sound, and like you said, they complement each other so well because I think of how different their vocal styles are. So I think this is a solid tune. Not one of my favorites on the album by any stretch, but it really did grow on me after a while. I've probably listened to this song more than any other song on the album just because of it's the one that's been available for the longest.
And that makes sense. But when you compare it to the next track, which is the second single, Universe, Gravity for Hearts, I think that it is like night and day. And you talk about how the band writes a great power ballad. The band also writes a great epic track, and there's two of them on this album. This is the first one. It's the longest track. It's almost 8.5 minutes long, and it is my song of the week. I am not going to cue it up for the reasons we kind of talked about earlier. But at the end of the day, this song feels special from the opening notes, and the riff that just follows out that intro is just absolutely outstanding. The chorus is infectiously catchy, and it just stays in your head for days. And I think that it's Kiss really defying Father Time in many ways, because he shows his range on this track. Ironically, I don't think the bridge is perfect, unlike some of the bridges I mentioned earlier, but that fast section in the middle is so heavy and direct, really tight solos. And from the first time I heard the album, I found this to be a real standout track, and it's only gotten better with each listen. This particular track is like a blend of like Keeper's era and that 90s era Dara stuff that I love. And so when you package it all together, this, even though it's not really a single in the sense that it's going to get radio play at 8+ minutes long, this was the song I kept going back to. And I'm like, if the whole album was like this, it might be their best album. That's how much I like the song. But it certainly stands out amongst the rest as a favorite of mine.
This is another one that grew on me a lot the more I listened to it. This was a song that was written by Sasha Gerstner, and you have to give it to the guy. He joined the band in 2001, 2002 as a replacement for Roland Grappo, and he immediately wrote songs that felt like Helloween songs, even though he was a new member of the band. And this is just further proof that was the absolute right choice to join the band at that time, because it's just been seamless. He's written some of the best Helloween songs of the last 20 plus years. And this is one of the best songs on the album. And it must be interesting, like, for those who haven't heard this album yet, that the last two songs are the only songs they've heard up to this point, and they could not be more different. Both like just the way they're presented and songwriting wise. But this just has, like, like you said, it's epic. It has like those really long solo passages, really dramatic vocals from Michael Kiske. I think he does all the vocals on this track, actually. So it also has kind of like that bridge kind of has a little bit of like a gamma ray kind of feel to it too. With I think it's Kai doing backing vocals on this one. It sounds just like him. Really, really strong track and a really good choice. I argue this might have been better off as the first single. I think it really would have whet people's appetite for the album a little bit more.
I agree.
And then they could have went with This Is Tokyo as a second single. That's a little bit more... It kind of reminds me of when Better Than Raw came out and they went with I Can for the first single and then Hey Lord as the second single, which was a little bit more of a poppier tune. This is a good one. And honestly, I think from this point on, the album is incredibly strong all the way to the end.
Yeah, the back of this album was really what kind of stood out to me when I first heard it. And I don't know that my opinion has changed all that much for the worse. I think that the back half of this album is quite good. So we move on to Hand of God, the 8th track. I want to hear your thoughts on this before I jump in. But this is another Darius-led track that is very similar to, I think, to some of the stuff that they had done earlier in their career.
This was another song that Sasha wrote, which is really, I think it's just great because it doesn't sound like the last song that he wrote. It has its own kind of vibe to it. A little bit more, this is more of a mid-tempo song, and I think it kind of reminds me a bit of like Hey Lord in a lot of ways, where it just is kind of like a really mid-tempo kind of tune. I wouldn't call it a ballad. It's just kind of like a chill tune, but it's really good. It's really catchy, and I think that chorus really was one of those choruses that got stuck in my head the more and more I listened to it. I think it's well placed before the next kind of faster paced song. It just, like you said, it's kind of akin to like a lot of the mid-tempo songs from the Darius era of the late 90s, early 2000s, and beyond. It's kind of a simple song, but it's good. I like this one, and let's see. I'm just checking to see if there's anything to mention on this one from the press release. They didn't mention anything from this track in particular. So, what were your thoughts on this one?
It didn't blow me away, but it was a solid, safe song. And what I think the biggest compliment that I can give to it is that I would like not play it for a couple of days. And then a few days later, I would find myself singing the song. I'm like, wow, this chorus is really an earworm. And so for better or for worse, it just got stuck in your head. And I don't know that there was really much to say other than it was kind of a short song at under 4 minutes, but just there and like a good solid song on the back half of the album. And it kind of is sandwiched in between my song of the week and what was probably my backup song of the week, Under the Moonlight. And so it's well placed, but it has this unenviable position in between, in being between two really, really great tracks. Under the Moonlight is just over 3 minutes long, but this song was so interesting to me because it feels like it was something that should have been a B-side, like Livin' Ain't No Crime. But I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, like, this should have been another Keeper 2 B-side, and that's a really big compliment. Again, it had that Livin' Ain't No Crime vibe, and it has this fun quality to it that I just really enjoyed. And the Kisk's leads were just typical, like, I don't want to say whimsical, but just like carefree, happy power metal that I'm there for it. And I think that it's a song that they'll probably never play live, but I would love to hear it because this song always just puts a smile on my face. And so for that reason alone, it was in contention for Song of the Week.
This is my favorite song on the album. I didn't make it my song of the week, but it's my favorite song on the album because it just has that infectious Michael Weikath songwriting quality to it that like only he can bring to the table. And the reunion with Kisk, the Michaels together again, it's just magical. And I love the placement of this song as the penultimate track. It's perfect. I think as I harp on track orders a lot. I thought the track order for this album really was right. Like I think they nailed it. And this is perfectly placed here. Weike has this songwriting history of writing these like epic power metal songs like Eagle Fly Free and like Savior of the World, which we heard earlier. But he also writes these great, really fun, quirky songs like Dr. Steen and like Livin' Ain't No Crime was a great comparison to this one. Rise and Fall, another super memorable Weike track. I just love his. I mean, when it's all said and done, when people say like, who is your favorite songwriter, and I'm not just talking about metal, I'm just favorite songwriter. Period. It's Michael Weikath is in that discussion for me, if not the winner. Dr. Death from our UK friends, formerly of Power Quest, Mr. Steve Williams is up there too, and that man has written way more songs than Weike because he was writing like almost every Power Quest song for a while. But those are probably my two favorite songwriters ever, right there. This is just such a fun song, and I would like after I would listen to it, I would play it again because it's so short that like I'm just like I want to hear the song again. This, in my opinion, should have been the single instead of This Is Tokyo for like the fun poppy single. I just think it's a better song. But I love this. It might not be for everyone if you're into like more like more like stoic and serious power metal songs, because this one definitely has an air of levity to it. But I think it's phenomenal, and I liked it immediately. Like, this was one that required no needed growth for. I just liked it right away, and just I wish Wyke wrote more songs for the albums. It's always like you get the two, maybe three, but I just he's just such one of my favorite songwriters. Just great. But not to be outdone, his songwriting partner from the Keeper era and the Walls of Jericho era has one more thing he'd like to submit for your listening pleasure, and that is the song Majestic. I'm going to let you take it away, because I know your song of the week from the previous album was also the last song on the album. It was also a song written by Kai Hansen, and that was Skyfall. So I'm wondering if you have any strong feelings about this track, which also is the last track, also was written by Kai Hansen.
Almost as good as Universe. This song is fantastic. It has this real slow start to it, almost a very deliberate start, a very good use of the keyboards. I love how everyone sings. And I also love how as this 8-minute track goes on and on, it just gets heavier and heavier. I think the chorus is just an absolute fantastic vocal display from both Deris and Kisk. The guitar work is superb. I think the instrumental sections of this song are top notch. And for some reason, I don't know why, I thought the drums actually sounded better on this track. I just liked how sonically how they sounded. But that Hansen-led bridge is so gamma ray, and I am so there for it. So it is not surprising to me at all. And there's certain drum fills on this that remind me of what Ingo was doing on the Keeper era. Now, I don't know if that was intentional or if it's just when you're a massive fanboy, you hear things that maybe were unintentional, but they kind of strike you because of how well you know the music. It was like Danny Lobo was like channeling his inner Ingo Schwichtenberg on this track, and so God bless him for that. This is a great way to close the album, and Kai has now done 2 albums in a row where he wrote these epic songs that just ended, and it almost craves you, like makes you want either more tunes or to go back to the beginning and start listening again. So that is the biggest testament I can give. You mentioned Wyke's songwriting, and I certainly understand that. I would put Hansen up there as well, because that man has written some of the best power metal songs known to man, not only in Helloween, but obviously Gamma Ray as well.
The piano on this track reminded me of Power Quest. It reminded me of like Sixth Dimension, which was a title track from the band's last album. That piano tone it felt like they hired Steve to come over and play a few tickle the ivories a little bit for this track. I'll tell you something really interesting that may shed some light on the drumming sounding different, and that's that Danny recorded all of the tracks on 3 different drum sets to individually decide which set delivers the perfect vibe for a song. And according to the press release, this was only imaginable through unrestrained love of experimentation and highest standards. And I think that's not something, I don't think that happens. Someone could correct me if I'm wrong, but that's not something I think that happens very often in a recording session. So that might have something to do with it.
So then at least I know I'm not crazy, but I mean, it just shows, I mean, I'm not saying this to pat myself on the back, but I listened to these songs so intently with the multiple listens that I heard the nuances. So I'm not like, I must have been onto something, because he probably used a different kit and it was just a little less tinny. And because you're using 3 different kits, you're talking about setting up for recording at least 3 different times. So I think that really says something. And it was noticeable. It really was. I love the sound of the drums, and I love this song because Lobel's drumming is just fantastic.
Yeah, I also like this one a lot, and it has different sections to it that really give it that epic feel. Again, coming from the press release, alongside We Can Be Gods, Majestic is also one of the tracks featuring all 3 singers of this Helloween Super Alliance. Both songs were penned by Kai and launch all trademarks that secured his place deep in metal hearts. Kai goes on to say, "The space and aliens are my favorite themes and pretty fascinating, but you could also read the chorus as a description of the band. We're back and we're the masters of power metal. I'll leave that up to the listeners," laughs Kai. So great last tune. I've yet to hear, and I assume you haven't heard either. There is going to be an additional track on there's going to be a 2-disc version of this album. And there's another track called Out of Control. I don't know who wrote it. I don't know what it sounds like. I'm looking forward to hearing it, and I'll comment on it when I do hear it. And then there are several versions of Into the Sun that they did. They did an Andy solo version, they did a Kisk solo version, and they did an acoustic version with both of them. So I'm looking forward to hearing that as well. So there are some extra tracks yet to be heard. Before we go into our scores, I'm going to just read a little bit more from this press release. There's some really good information here. Consistently topping superlatives and presenting yet another milestone with Giants and Monsters requires the courage to keep reinventing a colossus like Helloween, as well as continuing to challenge 7 brimming careers even after 4 decades, and the instincts of the congenial producers Charlie Bauerfeind and Dennis Ward. For example, the fact that Danny Lobo recorded all tracks on 3 different drum sets. An effort and attention to detail that not everyone is willing to bring to the table. The mix was done at the legendary Whistlelord Studios in Hilversum, which have witnessed the works of the greatest names in music, from Iron Maiden to Judas Priest and Def Leppard to Rammstein. Friction is another secret of the band that experiences a second spring with the reunion. And I think this quote really speaks to the variation of tracks on this album. And this one comes from Wyke. He says, "What keeps motivating us is the fact that we're extremely different. That generates suspense and creative energy. And if problems do occur, we connect through our passion and our sense of humor. We try not to take ourselves and everything around us too seriously." That adds Kai. Before Darius concludes, "In the end, we're just 7 guys who want to make music and enjoy the incomparable force that arises when we're together. Helloween is way more powerful than the sum of its parts." So I kind of wanted to just wrap it up with that. That was from 3 of the members of the band kind of giving their thoughts on this. And boy, as far as scores that have grown from the first listen to last listen, this is probably one of the more dramatic ones for me. But I'm going to let you lead with your score. I'm very curious what you are going to give this one.
Yeah, after I first heard it, I had actually asked myself, is this going to make my top 50? Is it possible that a Helloween album just doesn't crack the top 50, which almost like other bands like we've talked about in the past, a Nightwish or something like that, anything short of album of the year almost feels like a disappointment, although I think those are unreasonable expectations for most bands. But I really questioned my desire or my love of the album after that first listen, but I've done a real 180. I didn't tell you this offline, but as I got into it this week specifically, the score just shot up for me. So what would have been probably a 6, maybe a 6.25 at that first listen has now gone up to an 8. And so this album has really that is a seismic shift in terms of my change of opinion on this. I am confident that it's just a question of where it finds itself in the top 50, not whether or not it's going to be on there. That's how good the album is now to me. And I was quick to come to judgment, but happy to have kind of reversed course on this. And as we were here, I was listening to the Universe single on a high res quality on one of the streaming services that I use, and it actually sounded really good. So I'm wondering if there's actually the best version of this yet to come, in which case my score may even go up some more.
Nice. That's great. Yeah, I was nervous when this first came out. I was is this not going to be a album of the year contender for me? A Helloween album? Are you kidding me? But after listening to it a dozen or so times, I've kind of changed my tune on this one. I'm giving it a 9.125. I still, for me, that last album, I think the timing, everything, all things considered, is a bit better for me, and I stand by that 9.5 I gave it. But this is still a very, very good album once everything kind of clicked. The songs that I like the most, I really like, and are songs that I will be listening to under the moonlight repeatedly for the rest of my life. I can promise you. Same with Savior of the World. And then there were songs like Giants on the Run and This Is Tokyo and Hand of God that really grew on me over time. We Can Be Gods is another good one. I'm really excited to hear what other people have to say. I think our friends at the MSR cast are really the only people I've talked to that have heard this thing. So I'm curious to see what everybody else thinks when the album drops on August 20th. I think it's the 27th in Japan and the 29th everywhere else. So there's a vinyl edition that has two 12-inch vinyls with 7 different colors. And then there's the 2 CD earbook, which has all those bonus tracks as mentioned. And I assume a nice booklet full of lots of great photos and stuff, as is typical. So yeah, I'm really excited to hear what other people have to say about this one. I'm wondering if by the time we get to Atlanta, everyone will have had enough time to listen to this, and then we can kind of hear what they have to say about it in person. But yeah, this really went from like an 8 to like a 9+ for me. In a pretty, I probably listened to this album for a good month or so. So probably more than I would ever typically listen to an album that we do for this podcast. But I did the same for the new Dream Theater album too, because I really wanted to feel like I knew the album well before we discussed it. And yeah, it's kind of an interesting dichotomy. Those two albums, that one coming out earlier this year, and this one this year, or like now, I should say, later this year. Two bands that we are incredibly long time fans of, and are very critical of because of that. And so it's always interesting when they release new albums. And I have a feeling as time goes by, they'll probably both be bands that we will review their new albums as they're released, just because they're kind of, just big deals for both of us. So what I think, at some point, you're going to have to choose a Dream Theater album, because I think I've chosen all of them except for the Change of Seasons bonus episode. So I'd be curious to see what you would pick now that I've picked a lot of the good ones, a lot of the ones that we both prefer. But time
we'll be going
tell.
back to when Dream and Day unite. Don't you worry. I'll just say this: it's all of their albums are obviously on the horizon, so it's just a matter of when I get the urge or whatever. But yeah, like I said, a seismic change on this one, and I'm glad that we got to cover it, basically to coincide with its release. And I'm sure, again, we'll be going back to Helloween in the future. But I wanted to just mention a pair of news items before I talk a little bit about next week's item. I mentioned Metallica doing that show out in the Hamptons at the end of the month. It turns out that Metallica is already having discussions about doing a residency at the Las Vegas Sphere. I got to be honest, I'd be really interested to see that show in that venue if they ever do a residency there. I feel like that would just be a really fun place to see a show. I suspect it would be a greatest hit set if they're playing to a lot of tourists going to Vegas, but at the same time, they've got enough good songs that it really doesn't matter. But yeah, Metallica rumored to be doing a residency at the Las Vegas Sphere at some point in the future. And then also another artist that we've talked about and who's actually about to go out on tour, and that's Bruce Dickinson, touring for his Mandrake Project album. The reason I mention him is his next solo album is going to be recorded next year, according to him, and looking to have his next album out in 2027. So as the Iron Maiden train rolls on, Bruce's solo stuff is not taking a back seat, and I'm sure that there are many people that are very happy about that as well. So just a little bit of news and notes before we talk about next week's album, which, we're almost 300 albums into this thing, and this was an album that we are going to cover, which I have never heard up until this point. I had never heard of this band until this point, and the band is called Scatterbrain. The album is called Here Comes Trouble, and I listened to it once. I've never heard anything like this in my life, and I don't mean that as a bad thing. It is just so different and wacky and fun. It's going to be a really interesting discussion. Have you had a chance to check anything off of this album yet?
I gave like the first like minute or so of the first track a listen, and I was like, "Oh, this is going to be fun. This is going to be an interesting conversation." So, thanks to our friend Brian Hewler for that request. A reminder, the Patreon folks are the ones that are making these requests. If you want to be able to make requests, please check us out on Patreon. And another one of the benefits is that this happens to be one of those the episodes that we're recording quite a bit ahead of schedule, and so this is going to be dropped in the Patreon feed as soon as we're done recording it, and so they'll have this episode over a week in advance of its release. So that's another one of the benefits. If you want to see more information or just curious about any of that, go to metalexchangepodcast.com, and there's a link in the top right that says join our Patreon, and you can get all the details on that. We are very grateful for our Patreon family, and we look forward to seeing some of them in Atlanta in just about a week or so. As of recording, let's see. It'll only be not less than a week. It'll just be a handful of days between this episode dropping and us heading out to Atlanta. So a lot to look forward to. And this was man, I look forward to these episodes so much because this is just a band that is just always been very close to my heart, as you know, and I still plan on, if all works out, on continuing our march through the band's discography, where Time of the Oath would be the next album. I think I'm going to try to squeeze that in before the end of the year, but we'll keep you posted on that. I have a few anniversaries I'd like to celebrate before we get to that, so fun things to come. The week after the Scatterbrain request, we will be probably posting a Patreon only episode that we've done in the past while we are in Atlanta, and then the week after that we will come back with our annual recap of the festival, which is going to be really, really interesting. So yeah, lots of things to look forward to, and this was a blast. Helloween always gets the inner babbler to come out for me, especially. So I hope I wasn't overly verbose on this one, but this turned out to be what I was hoping it would. Because like, to me, anytime Helloween releases like a sub 9 album for me, it's a disappointment. So looks like they passed the test, they made the grade, and I guess we'll have to wait a few more years before their next full length album comes out.
Onwards and upwards, my friend. Well said. Enjoy the week, and I will catch up with you soon.
Take care, buddy.